So, did you know that 50% of the US has a reading level below the sixth grade? That's right. That's like below 12 years old. 50% of the US population has below a 12-year-old reading level. That's actually fucking insane. So, that's in relation to this Upcomer news. And the fact that they have laid off the majority of their writing staff and editorial staff for their writing division as they are looking to pivot towards video content. Now, this seems a little absurd, but it does seem par for the course because we've seen several different media websites close their doors because they are not able to sustain themselves, sustain their writers, and to justify to their board members or the people that are funding the website that this is a just cause or this is a just way to use their money and that they will actually get a profit from this. And this has always been the case for esports media websites. There have been several major websites that have closed down over the years, and it's become a very cyclical pattern if you've been paying attention to this. Now, that's not to say that 50% of my subscribers don't know how to read above a sixth grade reading level. Pretty sure all y'all motherfuckers do have higher than that, given, that I write actual articles. But it's the ridiculousness of, I guess, maybe the audacity of Upcomer in the sense that they don't value their readers or the fact that they don't see reading potential further on into the future. But then again, when I came up with that statistic, I don't actually fucking blame them. So let's pull up something of Jacob Wolf's tweet. He had highlighted that essentially, so with Upcomer and Destructoid Layoff News, which is owned by this group called Enthusiast Gaming, that essentially they have spent $7 million on their budget for content creation, web development, and technology support. And I imagine the technology support isn't that much, and the web development also wouldn't be that much either. But also, this $7 million budget also does include U.GG, which is it's a pretty big website. So, they obviously do a lot of different things with League of Legends, of course, with keeping up with different patches, different champion win rates, different builds, et cetera, right? But I think we could safely say that to slot a lot or some of that money towards Upcomer and that $7 million figure, you begin to wonder if maybe Upcomer writers or Upcomer editors were actually just obscenely overpaid. And there was actually a tweet coming out from Radoslavin, he's a editor for Inven Global, and he was talking about how, yes, he believes that a lot of people at Upcomer were overpaid and that they shouldn't be expected to be paid the same or even remotely near the same wages that they were being paid at Upcomer. And so this is exactly why I haven't left my fucking day job. It's because I know that there's no world to where a website can actually pay me sustainably the same wage that I make at my day job. Now, it's not actually saying that I make that much from my day job. I actually don't, especially considering that I live in LA. But I realize that if they even were to try and do that it would not be sustainable at all. And that's to say I'll just say it safely, I'm making below $90,000 a year, right? So I'm not making an absurd amount of money, but I'm giving you a ballpark, $90,000 to $60,000 a year. That's about what I'm making. So that's kind of saying something of just like, okay, well, if I'm not willing to go into this entire shit, then obviously like there's something going wrong with esports journalism. And I think that's largely true. So let's get to the entire idea of video content versus written content. There are certain advantages and disadvantages of both mediums. The advantage of written content is the fact that it can be consumed passively, and the fact that I can listen to a podcast or, I can listen to a video, and as long as the video is not incredibly engaging as far as visuals, then I can engage into it when I'm listening on the treadmill, or when I'm working out, or when I'm driving to work, or maybe when I'm in the office. I can listen to it very passively. That's the large advantage of video type style content. Now, one of the bad things about written content is that it has a higher barrier of entry, and the idea that you need to focus on that content, because you can't read something and not really focus on it. It just doesn't work that way in terms of the attention span or the human brain. On top of that, it's that written content needs to be focused on like almost an exorbitant amount of energy in terms of what I was talking about before of reading comprehension, and the fact that reading comprehension it's clearly, I think, declining within at least the US specifically, but it's also the fact that half of the US population may not be able to decipher what you're actually talking about in a cogent manner. And maybe if you don't use incredibly verbose words like cogent or verbose, etc., is that they still might not understand it because you're talking about it maybe in more of an abstract way. And I always say this as the bar of maybe what I determine as someone that is actually intelligent is the fact that if they can extrapolate the idea of what is a metaphor, and if they can't actually do that, even if they don't understand the metaphor, at least they can recognize that it's a metaphor. If they can't even do that, then I think their reading comprehension is actually incredibly low. And I see this more and more today as I see people interact with social media, et cetera, et cetera. So written content clearly has a high barrier of entry. Now, when I get into the mechanical aspects of both differences, you could just think of the consumption of both mediums. So you speak in about 150 words per minute when it comes to just speech itself. If you're an eloquent speaker, and maybe I'm probably more on the slow side, so I probably speak like 120 words per minute or something like that. Now, as far as the average adult reader, you actually read at about 300 words per minute. That means that you read twice as fast as someone that speaks. So that means that they can actually give you as much information as you're able to comprehend at a comprehension level, just, even as a consummation level. So that means necessarily that you can consume knowledge twice as fast as in the written medium than you can as the vocal or, the orator medium. So that means that there's going to be different audiences for different things. And the fact that if people want to consume information faster, they want to do it in a written medium, even though that takes a higher level of concentration, versus in a video medium, that means that maybe that they could consume it, and maybe they could actually consume it during a longer duration of time, and maybe they will be able to consume more because of that aspect, versus say they could consume the same amount of knowledge and say if it takes a podcast 30 minutes to go over, well, if twice that aspect, right, because I just said, people can consume content twice as fast if they read it, that means that they would have to actually read something maybe that is like, okay, well, now you have to consume things as 15 minutes of reading versus 30 minutes of listening through a podcast. Maybe people don't have 15 minutes of actual intensive reading, but they do have leisure time of 30 minutes of just listening to something. That creates a different type of dynamic when it comes to that. So these are the different aspects that you need to think about when it comes to the written and the listening or video format of both types of mediums. Now, on top of that, you have to consider that equipment for video is also expensive, and the fact that you gotta have fucking camcorders, you gotta have different audio equipment, etc. Like you have to have all the like lighting, all this shit, right? It's very expensive. Then you have to think of editing a video. I think it's more complicated than editing videos. The only reason why I say that is because, editing videos is more complicated than editing written. And the fact that the entry barrier for editing videos is actually far higher, because you first have to have probably that access to video equipment, but also the software technology in order to do that. So then that becomes just much more difficult versus with the written aspect. You just have to be good with words. It's about it, and you have to have logic, etc. So there becomes this entire discrepancy between the editing staff of both video and written, and the fact that they actually can't really coagulate that much. They require vastly different skills, I guess you could say. But I would also say too that you actually do need people that are editors of written content in order to have some input of video content. But all of this, and you're asking, well, why is Upcomer pivoting towards video? It's because of monetization. It's far more easier to monetize video than it is to monetize written content. It's just very simple. I like to give the analogy of a distribution center. I work in the food industry. And it's that you buy from a distribution center because it's far more easier. They have far more access to a multitude of different products that you might need. Pizza dough, pasta, marinara sauce, fucking chicken, ground beef, turkey, etc. They have it all in one different location, and you could buy from them. What they do is they ask all the farmers, give me all your shit from all these different other sources. We'll combine them, and then we'll ship it out to all these different restaurants or all these different supermarkets, etc. So you need a distribution center at some point, because you probably don't have the storage in order to actually hold all these different ingredients. So that's what YouTube is. YouTube is this storage center. That's why Google AdSense, for instance, and the fact that they tell all these big companies, hey, hey Nestle, hey Coca-Cola, hey, fucking Trojan condoms, I don't give a shit. Yo, we got this huge audience. Give me all your ads. I'll give you some screen time. Tell me which demographic you want to target. Tell me which area or geological location you want to target. I'll give you them people, right? So, and it's notoriously hard to get companies to sponsor small accounts. So this is what becomes difficult for certain esports websites. It's the fact that you have difficulty getting sponsorships because you're so small and your traffic's so small, etc. Versus you can go to YouTube, they have a huge conglomerate, and you could just have YouTube pick all the shit for you, and they kind of divvy it up. On top of that, you think of, ad block, and everyone talks about ad block, and they're just like, yo, like ad block's actually pretty insane, all this shit. And it is insane in esports. And I think on top of that, you have to figure of marketing itself or sponsorships themselves. They're very difficult to actually justify. I like to often reference Rory Sutherland. I consider him like the modern Edward Bernays, but he's just like a benevolent version of him, luckily. But he often spouts that it's very difficult to convince a company, if you're the marketing arm, the people that you are in constant combatant towards within your own entire company is the accounting department. Because the accounting always wants to say, how are you justifying these numbers? How are these numbers directly helping? Like, I want the A to B type shit of how this is helping the entire company. And what marketing does is they say, I actually can't give you that because it's rather nebulous. I can't actually fucking tell you one to one this is what it is or this is how much dollars that we got from marketing, etc. There are very rare instances to where that actually equates one to one of dollars. And so that's why it's so hard to justify that shit. And this is the day-to-day struggle of esports advertisement, or rather the fact that esports websites have to reach out to these marketing firms, and then the marketing firms have to reach out to their fucking accounting firms and say, this is why we think this is actually worth it. And so you're like third part or fourth part or fifth part of the food chain. And that creates the difficult circumstances to actually survive in the entire ecosystem. This is why esports journalism is actually hard to survive in. And not only that, but just journalism in general. So just think of regular journalism and how it's very hard to survive because, as I was talking about, justifying that these marketing firms, which are tied to accounting people within an entire large different company, of why they should spend money on your fucking website as far as like a journalistic website. Now just peg that down like a couple different levels and you're an esports journalist website. Then that becomes way fucking harder. And then on top of that, you have to figure the fact that a lot of journalism is now going towards just headline journalism, to where people only read the headlines. And so they don't even actually click on your shit. So you can't even justify the ad dollars that you're supposed to be getting, because they're supposed to be clicking to your website in order to actually view these fucking ads, but they don't, because they just read the goddamn headline and that's it, and they take it at its surface value. So this is why esports journalism is fucked up. Just laid it all fucking out for you. But this is why Upcomer is going towards video, is because it's very difficult to get ad revenue. They figured out it's easier to get ad revenue from a gigantic source like Google AdSense rather than actually pitching towards all these different outlets and whatnot. And then on top of that, paying all these people to do these long form pieces of esports journalism, which are actually very valuable, but it's very hard to put a monetary aspect on something that's like investigative reporting, which has a moral kind of obligation to the entire scene. But guess what? Companies don't operate off of morals. They operate off of dollars. Don't fucking forget that.